Blizzard, send me something. Oh my. Thank you, Blizzard. Greetings Internet, DDA here, and I'll be honest, I did not plan on making a Sorcerer in Season 3 of Diablo 4. That is until I read the patch notes and saw the Starfall Coronet. This item creates an entire new build for Meteor. Now, if you saw one of my previous videos, I did a Meteor X-Falls build. I still think that build is viable, and I think that this helmet is best in slot for that build because of the insanely high level of lucky hit that it's giving you. That, of course, is going to be amazing for X-Falls. However, since this item drops an additional 3 meteors around the meteor, that means you're dropping a total of 4 meteors per cast of meteor. And it only has a 6-second cooldown. This means that we can actually scale meteor damage versus scaling X-Falls damage and create a whole new meteor build with Fireball supporting. This item is quadrupling down on any bonuses that you're giving to Meteor. I'm so excited for this, guys. I'm so excited for Season 3. This is going to be amazing. Let's get into the guide. Now, of course, everything is going to be theoretical. I have not tested any of this out, obviously, because the helmet does not exist yet. We are not in Season 3. This is going to come out on Tuesday, so I'm really excited to level my Sorcerer and build this Meteor build. I think this could actually be one of the strongest Sorcerer builds to date, you know, given the fact that Ball Lightning was just massively nerfed because we all knew it was bugged already. So getting into the skills, what you're going to have on your bar is Ice Armor, Ice Blades, Flame Shield, Teleport, Meteor, and Fireball. Now here, Fireball is going to serve as a supportive skill, as a way for us to actually use mana, because mana is not going to be used with the Starfall Coronet. Because mana is not being used by Meteor, this takes a huge amount of mana and the need for mana away from our build. We don't need Inferno. We took out a lot of the mana cost reduction and mana regeneration rolls from our build. It's pretty easy to get close to a 50% cooldown reduction, which means that the Meteor can have a cooldown of only 3 seconds. To me, that shows that we are going to use Meteor as our main damage skill versus Fireball. And of course, because every single cast of Meteor is summoning 4 meteors, and then every enhanced meteor proc is summoning 2 meteors, and every meteor enchantment proc is likewise summoning 2 meteors. And we are going to use the meteor enchantment because yes, it is only a 10% chance, but when that 10% chance triggers, you get 2 meteors. Really strong. So your second enchantment slot is I'm really thinking about this. I'm going to start out by using Fireball as my second enchantment slot, which is a little scary to not run the Fire Bolt enchantment as the second enchantment slot, because that means that you're going to 100% rely on Meteor for the applying the burning effect to get your damage reduction from burning enemies. Now, you can use the construct to apply burning effect to get this more consistently, so that's something to consider. Other options that I'm considering for the second enchantment slot, I mentioned Fire Bolt enchantment just in case you wanted consistency in burning. That's not a bad idea, and the Fire Bolt enchantment does add some to your lucky hit. Likewise, I'm also considering using Ball Lightning. Now, because we're scaling Meteor, we are scaling a lot of mastery skill effects, so Ball Lightning would benefit from that. It is also a lucky hit based trigger, and we are scaling lucky hit a little bit with this build. We're not having a crazy focus on lucky hit because we're not playing X-Falls, actually. Using the Ball Lightning enchantment would give us an easy access to the lightning damage for our Tal Rashas. We do, right now, Teleport, as the build is, Teleport is our only form of lightning damage. I don't think that's really a problem with how aggressive you can be with fire builds, but I'm going to play around because I do think the Fireball enchantment is going to scale nicely with the build, and especially if you use that gripping aspect, the gripping enhancement on the construct to pull everything together. So basically your construct will pull everything together, you will summon a bunch of meteors, and then your Fireball enchantment will explode and destroy everything. Sounds really, really good. So this is what I'm starting with. So moving on to the skills, we are going to max out Fireball and take it all the way to Destructive Fireball. because we are going to be scaling a lot of critical strike damage with this build. We are maxing out Fireball because, like I said, we're using it as a filler in between the time that Meteor is on cooldown. Take Devastation, and then, of course, put 3 points in Elemental Dominance. Really important to scale their Meteor and your Fireball damage. We are actually maxing out Flame Shield, and then we had a point left over, so we threw the point into Enhanced Flame Shield. Why not? Extra movement speed. And then, of course, take Teleport all the way to Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction. Max out Glass Cannon, throw 1 point into Elemental Attunement because, again, lucky hit based build, so we're going to be able to trigger this a lot. Put 1 point into Ice Armor, and then also put a point into Enhanced Ice Armor. I had some points left over, and I said that we don't really need mana regeneration in this build, and that is true. We saved a lot of mana regeneration rolls on our gear, but I felt that because we removed a lot of mana regeneration from our gear, because again, Meteor is not going to use any mana, it's just going to be a cooldown ability, I felt like it was needed to just throw one mana ability into the build just for the Fireball spam when Meteor is on cooldown, and we had the points, so why not? Moving down, you're going to take 3 into Precision Magic for the lucky hit, and we are actually going to enhance Ice Blades all the way to Summoned Ice Blades, because Ice Blades is actually going to help us a little bit. Not only apply Vulnerable, because this builds, we have to see how well the construct is at applying Vulnerable, and then likewise, the Ice Blades is going to help you apply Vulnerable as well, but then the Summoned Ice Blades is actually going to help you reduce Meteor's cooldown. Really important here, and I like this because we want to get that cooldown as low as possible on Meteor. Then moving down to the mastery skills, we of course are maxing out Meteor and taking it all the way to Mage's Meteor. I mentioned before in my previous Meteor video that you can take Wizard's Meteor. I do like it. It's good. You can save some points in Crippling Flames by doing that. I don't feel it's necessary because we had the points, and the faster falling to me just helps the usability so much of Meteor. Just makes, and it actually kind of makes it for higher DPS, not so much when it has a cooldown, but I just think it helps the usability so much when mobs are moving around. It's a lot harder to hit when it has slower falling. Then moving down to the ultimate skills, again, we are not taking Inferno because we don't need the mana. Then we are maxing out Fiery Surge. Why not? It's going to help us with the Fireball spam. We only took 1 point into Endless Pyre this time because we are not really focused on burning in this build. You could actually swap these points out and just put the points into Endless Pyre. If you found like you absolutely did not need the mana regeneration, just throw the extra points into Endless Pyre because it's going to just add more DPS. This is definitely viable. I'm not sure how much mana we're actually going to need. So that, I'm kind of kicking it around, but I'm going to adjust that on the fly when I start testing the build. And then, of course, take your 3 points into Warmth. I think this is a pretty standard skill for fire builds and just adding to your survivability. And then, of course, we are going to take Isu's Ferocity for the raw Critical Strike and Critical Strike damage for Meteor. Now, going over the equipment, again, this is going to be a heavily theorized and theory-crafted build. I'm not sure what is best, but obviously, for your helmet, you are going to use the Starfall Coronet. Best in slot, huge lucky hit, 25% lucky hit. That is crazy. That is just insane. That is 2 items worth of lucky hit. That is an aspect and an item worth of lucky hit. It's no conditions. It's not while you have a barrier. Just insane. This is a crazy item. It's going to be so strong. Can't wait to use it. So moving on to the chest, you were just going to do a classic damage reduction chest using Disobedience and using the quadruple damage reduction. Really needed there. The glove. Okay, so this is where we're going to have some kind of theory crafting here. Because originally, and when I started building the build, I wanted to use Gloves of the Illuminator. Not so much Staff of Endless Rage. Because we are using Fireball in this build, right? Staff of Endless Rage is giving up a lot. There's a lot of opportunity cost there with Staff of Endless Rage because you have to think of what you're taking away from the build, right? That is a two-hander, a 200% bonus slot on an aspect that you are giving up to use Staff of Endless Rage that has almost zero effect on your Meteor damage. So I knew we were not going to use Staff of Endless Rage in this build because we want to scale Meteor. That's going to be our hard hitter. Again, one cast of Meteor is casting 4 to 6 Meteors. With the gloves, I really wanted to use Gloves of the Illuminator. I did. However, I found that I just had very little. I wanted to run more aspects to scale Meteor, especially because Meteor doesn't have a mana cost. The Elementalist aspect becomes amazing, okay? It doesn't have a mana cost, so it's very easy for you to teleport or hit Flame Shield, run to full mana, and then just cast Meteor twice at full mana because it has no mana cost. Super easy for you to do. Elementalist aspect is going to be premium for this build. Now, there is a world where we don't run this because if you cap out everything on your gear, you are looking at, and dashing with Essu's Heirloom, you are looking at you're sitting at around 81% critical strike chance. So the Elementalist aspect is only really giving you between 20 and 35% crit, depending on you dashing with Essu's Heirloom and the critical strike rolls that you have on your gear. So there is a world if you have perfect gear, if you're a perfect player and you're dashing all the time, like you're at like 82% crit. So maybe don't run Elementalist at that point. I have to play around with it. And maybe we could add Gloves of the Illuminator in at that point and then increase the usability of Fireball. Because I know, like, I played Fireball for a while. Not running Gloves of the Illuminator is huge quality of life reduction. It's going to be, you know, massive for your AoE damage. It's going to reduce it a lot. I know that. But again, we mainly want to scale Meteor, and then Fireball is kind of a supplemental increase, like a supporting skill and extra damage that we're adding on. So I wanted to Meteor focus this whole build, and then Gloves of the Illuminator just didn't have a spot initially, but I'm going to look to add it in the future and test some things. So for your pants, you're going to run Tybalt's Will. I believe that Tybalt's Will is just the best damage increase, 40% multiplicative on everything. That's Fireball and Meteor, and also your Meteorites, which I'll get into a little later. So that's just a huge multiplicative damage increase on everything. So I believe it's the best for your damage. There is another world where we run plus Meteor pants, and this is an option, definitely. But I would only do this if we needed more damage reduction in the gauntlet. Because I believe that with a tier 100 build, this is going to roll tier 100 pretty easily with the way that I have the gear set up as is. If the gauntlet proves to be just as hard as Abattoir of Zir, there is a world where we switch to this damage reduction pants. And then in that world, I would swap Disobedience to the pants and then change your chest and actually run an Exploiter's chest then to get a little bit more damage to make up for losing to Bolts. It's not going to be as much damage as to Bolts because they're not going to be unstoppable all the time, but it's going to be comparable and good enough that it's going to make up for the lack of damage reduction, the extra damage reduction you need, and just add a little bit more damage. So that is an option for you. Also, like if you don't have Tybalt's yet, just starting out in the season, we're all going to be running around trying to get gear again. Tybalt's Will is a pretty rare unique, so I would run something like this until I found a really good Tybalt's, and then I would switch over. The boots you're going to be rolling is Essu's Heirloom. I just don't think that there is an option to swap this out for anything. Fire is very, very crit focused. We want that critical strike chance. We want that critical strike damage. Essu's Heirloom is actually a pretty common drop, so I don't see it as a problem for you to get this. So the weapon that we're running is actually pretty interesting because I said we're not running Staff of Endless Rage, and I chose to run a two-hander over, say, Wand Focus for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that because Meteor is based on a cooldown, something that I learned from Druid builds, I ran a Druid in Season 0. I've actually been changing my class every season. So in Season 0, I actually ran a two-handed Blurred Beast Poison Shred Druid before it became super popular. And something I noticed about running the two-handers is the two-hander increases the damage of cooldown-based abilities massively because the attack speed of the ability and the attack speed of using, say, a one-hander and an offhand it doesn't matter as much when you have a cooldown based ability, because you're not limited by your attack speed when your ability has a cooldown. You're limited by the cooldown. So it's better to run a two-hander to increase the raw damage, because no matter what, you're always going to be limited by that cooldown regardless of what your attack speed is. So that's the first reason. So this is just going to make Meteor hit harder because it's a cooldown. The second reason is because fire builds don't have that much to increase their damage in terms of aspects. Like, of course, we have Storm Swell, we have Conceited. Those are always there for us. But the Staff of Three Curses, the Three Curses aspect, is so unbelievably powerful. Look at this. 80% multiplicative damage, critical strike damage, doubling to 160% multiplicative damage against healthy targets. Let me tell you, what our meteors are going to be hitting for 10 to 20 million. This is going to be crazy. This is going to be so strong. There's actually a third reason why we're not running a wand focus, and that is because while this is a lucky hit based build, you know, we do have the meteor lucky hit. We want a little bit of lucky hit to trigger those meteors. That's good and all. However, you know, adding 15% or 20% lucky hit to the build, actually, when you do the math, because the meteor enchantment only has a 10% chance to trigger, you're really only adding about a 1% extra chance to trigger the meteor enchantment by adding a bunch of lucky hit. So is that really worth it at that point? You know, we're using wand focus, we're adding a bunch of lucky hit, 20% lucky hit, it's only really adding like a 1% extra chance to trigger. Is that really worth it? I don't think it actually is. I think the raw damage of doubling the Three Curses aspect and the raw damage of just using a two-hander, being limited by the cooldown and not so much the attack speed, I think this is better. So for the amulet, right now, it's funny because while I was building this build, I thought to myself, I was like, you know, we all have been using Ravenous for 2 months now, and when we lose Ravenous, it is going to just be this massive blow. People are going to be like, why am I so slow? Why do I feel like a snail? It's because we've been using Ravenous for 2 months, and we've all gotten used to having 60 to 80% extra attack speed just sitting on top of us for free. So, you know, the constructs are not doing that. They are giving us damage. They're giving us some combos that we can use with abilities. So it's a little different. It's not going to be a raw attack speed increase like the vampiric powers were. And to compensate for that, I added accelerating to the amulet, and this is also subject to change. Like I said before, Meteor is really limited by the cooldown versus the attack speed. However, I thought because we're not running attack speed on the gloves, and that's kind of why we chose to not run attack speed on the gloves. You know, we're running the critical strike chance, the fireball, lucky hit, and the intelligence. We're not even running plus primary resource on the gloves. So that is, you know, that's noteworthy there. Again, I don't think we're going to need a lot of resource, so I think we can get away with this. The plus fireball could also switch out for attack speed. But I didn't think, with running the accelerating on the amulet, I thought we could actually add just more raw damage to the gloves. So, but there is actually still a world where we don't really need attack speed, and we're just kind of relying on the meteor to be all of our damage. There's still a world that we do that. For now, I'm going to test out accelerating. I am keeping it open to add conceited on here for just a raw damage increase to everything. So I'm keeping that open. I would say Storm Swell, but I don't know how consistent the construct is going to be to apply vulnerable. So it's either, so I consider those three. I'm going to test all of them out. Either accelerating is what I'm going to start with, possibly Storm Swell, possibly conceited for your amulet for sure. And then on the amulet stats, we're going to have cooldown reduction. Want to reduce that meteor cooldown as much as possible. Ranks of mastery skills, scale meteor. Ranks of Devouring Blaze, super scale meteor, and then total armor. Just because we're using so many uniques, we are going to need that extra total armor roll to cap out on our armor. Our ring is Tal Rasha's. That's pretty standard. Keep in mind that the construct does have access to shadow damage, so it may be possible for us to stack 5 stacks of Tal Rasha's. Crazy. Keep that in mind. And then for the ring, we are not running the X-Falls, and the reason for that, the reason we're not running X-Falls is we are not running Conceited, we're not running Storm Swell. vulnerability might be difficult for us to apply. So, you know, all these things are kind of reducing the damage of X-Falls. We are focused on scaling Meteor, not X-Falls. So X-Falls is just not going to hit that hard. Plus, if we run X-Falls, we are actually losing a critical strike and critical strike damage roll. We're losing a lot of crit by running X-Falls. So I felt like with the way that this build was scaling Meteor, the fact that we were not going to have that much on X-Falls, you know, damage-wise, plus they made a change to meteorites. The meteorite damage has been changed to 20 to 30% of the meteor's casted damage. So we're putting a lot to scale meteor's damage into this build. So this may be ridiculous. And keep in mind, meteorites, 3 meteorites summon for every cast of meteor. That means we are summoning 12 to 18 meteorites. This could add an insane amount of damage to our cast of meteor. So for now, I'm keeping the Shattered Stars. Plus, the Shattered Stars do trigger Lucky Hit with the burning. So it does have a chance to trigger the Meteor Lucky Hit. So that's another consideration. So, and the fact that we're summoning like 12 to 18 of them, hello, like, all right, just, you know, its Lucky Hit chance is low, but when you're doing 18 of them, does it matter? I don't think so. So, and you can see that I'm also not running resource generation on this ring. I'm running pretty standard stats otherwise. Crit strike chance, Lucky Hit chance, crit strike damage. But I decided to change the resource generation. Normally we would have resource generation on here, but I was like, you know, I might not just need it. I might not need the resource generation. Again, Meteor doesn't have a mana cost. So just throw extra fire damage on there. Give me a raw damage increase, please. So that's it for your gears, subject to change. I'm going to play around with it a lot, and I suggest you do as well. Once we get further in the season, I'll release a final build guide for this guide. Now, going into the Paragon board, we actually grabbed 6 boards and 3 legendary nodes. The most legendary nodes I've ever grabbed on a Sorcerer build. So this is a lot, and, you know, we're going to get into it. So we're going to come up on the side, of course, for this non-physical damage, and throw your Elementalist glyph into here. Classic. Going to increase that resist all and get you that stacking damage buff. Again, you're going to want to teleport onto mobs to fully activate this, but that's not a problem for this build. Then you're going to come into your heart, and this truly is your heart in the Enchantment Master board. We are going to plug in Reinforced here for extra damage reduction while you have a barrier. Again, since Meteor doesn't have a mana cost, in previous videos, you saw that I was actually testing out the warding glyph because I was playing the Meteor X-Falls build at low mana. But because it doesn't have a mana cost anymore, well, there's no real reason to use that. And we actually are adding in cooldown reduction. We got the Ice Blaze for cooldown, so we can keep a barrier up more consistently now. Then you're actually going to come up and grab the Enchantment Master node. Just to mention why we are adding the Enchantment Master node, it does increase the chance of the Meteor summoning, and then likewise it increases the damage from the Fireball enchantment by 10%. That's going to be huge, considering that adds multiplicatively with like your 3 curses aspect. That's going to be big for us and add a lot of damage. And alternatively, I mentioned how we could run the Ball Lightning enchantment, and the Enchantment Master node would be great for the Ball Lightning enchantment as well. Make sure you grab this Suffuse Resilience for extra resist all, and then likewise come over for this extra non-physical damage. Then your next board, you're going to move into the Searing Heat board. This is where I throw Flame Feeder, just for the extra multiplicative damage increase. I have less of a focus on defense because I don't feel like the Gauntlet is going to be as difficult as the Abattoir of Zir was. You know, the Abattoir of Zir just did insane damage to you. I think the Gauntlet is going to be more about, you know, consistency in pulling mobs, consistency in clearing, clear speed and damage. I don't think it's going to be as taxing for like as much of a need as for damage reduction. So just consider that some of this may adjust depending on the survivability we have in the Gauntlet. But you actually could save more points by coming over here and coming in this way into the board. You actually save like 4 points by coming on this side. I decided to come on this side though because you actually get 40% fire damage by grabbing these flame touch nodes over here. And that's a lot of fire damage, so I thought it would be better just to grab that. Then you're going to come through the critical strike damage and come to the Searing Heat legendary node. This is going to be huge for your damage. Increase the multiplicative damage by your meteor by 30. Increase the multiplicative damage of your fireball by 30. And then it's actually getting buffed to 12% crit. Huge there. So for your next board, you're going to go into the Burning Instinct board. This is where we're going to add Tactician. Now, of course, usually I run Unleash for mana regeneration, but don't need mana regeneration because Meteor has no mana cost. So we are going to add Tactician for the higher raw damage and damage reduction increase. Make sure you come over here to grab the Safeguard node and then come through. And then our second to last board is going to be the Frigid Fate board. Come over and grab this damage reduction. Less of a focus on this because I don't know what the uptime on vulnerability is going to be. But grab it. It doesn't hurt like to get the extra 7% DR. And that, since we're coming through anyway. And then grab this Lucky Hit up here. Lucky Hit is great to grab. I wish we could grab this extra 2.5%, but can't fit it in the points. Grab your Frigid Fate. Now, there is a world where we drop Frigid Fate if the construct doesn't have an ability to apply vulnerable that well. I'm assuming right now it's going to be good enough to grab Frigid Fate. So that's how I'm going to start out playing it. We're going to have to test it out and see what happens. In the Frigid Fate board, I'm adding the Adept Glyph for the increased size on the Meteor. That's going to be huge. Every cast of Meteor is summoning 4 to 6 Meteors. So this is huge for you, just the exercise. And then the exercise as well, increasing the chance for that Enhanced Meteor to trigger, right? Because the Enhanced Meteor needs to hit, I think, at least 3 enemies or something like that to trigger the Enhanced Meteor. So this is going to help us trigger even more Meteors. Then come over to our final board, which is the Ceaseless Conduit and the Destruction Glyph, absolutely capping out at near 200% critical strike damage for the Meteor and for your firebombs. Now, I love Meteor. I love Meteor so much. I spent a lot of time making an X-Falls build work last season. I think, like I said, I think that X-Falls build is still going to be viable. We don't run X-Falls on this build because I just don't think the damage is going to be there for X-Falls. There's a world where we could try it out. I will try it out. I'll throw it in just to see. But I think the Shattered Stars is going to add a lot of damage with the recent buff. The fact that we're summoning 12 to 18 of the meteorites per cast of Meteor, that's just crazy. The extra Lucky Hit as well from the Lucky Hit procs from the Shattered Stars, I think is going to be a lot. So I'm going to test it out, but I think that Meteor, the Hydra Meteor build is going to stand for its ability to trigger X-Falls a lot and scale X-Falls. So I think that build is still going to be really good, the last one that I released. But I think this build is going to be the highest maximum scaling of actual Meteor damage. So thank you, Blizzard, for the Starfall Coronet. I'm so excited for Season 3. Please hit that like button if you like this video. Please hit subscribe for all the best Diablo guides and all the best Diablo content. We are going to now be playing the Sorcerer in Season 3 because I have to. I have to play this build. I love Meteor so much, so I have to play it. We are also going to be playing Barbarian in Season 3. So if you like Barbarians, hey, Barbarian's got a lot of changes too. So we are going to be playing a Barbarian and a Sorcerer. Expect to see tons of guides for Barbarian and Sorcerer in Season 3. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for the best Diablo 4 content and guides.